And we're back. Hello again. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I'm pleased to welcome on stage Bruno Tobak, Belgian MEP for the Socialists and Democrats group, as well as Sarah Mathieu, Belgian MEP for the Greens, to continue this conversation with European Commissioner Jessica Roswell on the Circular Economy Act. Short disclaimer before we start, Politico did try to reach out and include voices from the entire political spectrum. Timings and schedules are not always on our side, so don't come for me. A question for both of you, Bruno and Sarah, to kick us off. Are you pleased that the Commission is working on an overarching law for the circular economy? Is this the right time for such a bill, or on the contrary, is it regulatory overkill? Bruno, why don't you start?
Well, we'll have to wait and see what comes on the table, of course. I think it's a good idea that the Commission is working on it. I think it's time to both modernize a number of the instruments that exist and to look forward and be a bit more ambitious on some things. I think it's good that the term circular economy is front and center in the discussion. I think, and I was very happy to hear the Commissioner say it as well, that the linear model is something we cannot really continue doing the way we are doing it. Burn after use. It already makes no sense if you know how costly it is to extract and to process materials. It makes even less sense if you also have to import practically all of those materials into the European Union. So yes, I really hope that we can learn some lessons from what has been happening and that we can move forward ambitiously. Wait and see.
And Sarah?
Yeah, I think it's really high time we have an ambitious Circular Economy Act. I think it's super important from the environmental perspective, of course, as also the Commissioner has explained earlier. But I do think that it's also about jobs, about making sure that we have jobs here in Europe that cannot be offshored that easily. So I'm talking about refurbishment, I'm talking about repair, I'm talking about recycling. We've made a position paper with the Greens EFA called Remade in Europe, and that's really what I would like to push. So it's not just about a circular economy, it is also about the economical opportunities, of course, that are there. And it has been mentioned, this is really also about security and sovereignty, because I think we're all aware in Europe we are not that very rich when it comes to resources. Right now we are throwing away quite some of those valuable resources, and I think that that's something that really needs to be addressed. But if you want to do that, of course, you need to make sure that there is a business case. You need to make sure that there are also regulations to create market demand, for instance. And all of those things are things that you can't accomplish by omnibuses, by simplification. No, for that, and that's really also what the industry tells me, we need good rules. And that's really what I'm hoping that the Circular Economy Act will be.
Okay, so we need good rules, we need them to be ambitious. I feel like ambition is the word of the day today. Since you have the Commissioner here, why don't you tell her what you want to see in the Circular Economy Act? It's Christmas. Go for it.
In 2 words?
Yeah, very short.
Well, the first thing I would have liked to see was that we didn't have some legislation in an environmental omnibus that concerns circular economy when you're announcing a Circular Economy Act 6 months later. I think that is a very complicated way of doing simplification, honestly. Especially when it comes to EPR schemes, I'd say that we need to harmonize EPR schemes a lot more than we have been doing now. And I mentioned learning lessons. I look at what's happening, for example, in the WEEE, electronic and electrical waste. We should have reached a 65% collection target 4 years ago. We're at 40% in Europe. But in countries like Belgium, we're at 60%. So we are very close, which means that the EPR schemes across the 27 different member states, and there's more than 27 different EPR schemes even, are wildly different and divergent in their performance. So if we make a Circular Economy Act, let's make some clear rules that one EPR scheme per country, it will already be something, that is a not-for-profit scheme, learn the lessons from the ones that work, and make it indeed a lot simpler if you do it that way. That would be my great one hope in the Circular Economy Act. And when I stick to EPR schemes, the second one would be a little bit the same discussion that we are having in ETS in a different scale. Can we please have a bit of transparency and clarity about the use of the revenues out of those systems? Because the problem is not that there are revenues, The problem is that we have very little clarity about what the revenues are being used for. Are they being used for reaching the environmental performance goals, the collection targets, or in the case of ETS system, investing in decarbonization and electrification, or are just disappearing in the woods in national budgets, which is obviously the case in some member states. So let's please be honest to the citizens, because they are the ones finally funding those EPR schemes, to make sure that that money goes somewhere and at least be able to show where it goes. Two things.
So there's a few things to unpack here. If indeed the Commission has already proposed one solution or one effort to harmonize EPR schemes in this environmental omnibus that's going along its merry way in this legislative process, are you not satisfied with the proposal that the Commission put on the table, which is to remove authorized representatives for companies that have to comply with EPR schemes?
I cannot say I'm very enthusiastic about that. Well, first of all, because it runs ahead of the Circular Economy Act, which has also announced the revision of the EPR schemes and a discussion about it, which to me makes no sense. Secondly, the authorized representatives are basically the ones responsible for producers that would maybe not pay their EPR contributions. If you remove the obligation to have an authorized representative, basically it's going to be Mr. and Mrs. Taxpayer who become responsible and liable for unpaid fees by producers. I think that's the wrong way to go. If you need to simplify, yes, by all means do simplify, but if simplifying means you kick the can down the road to the households and the citizens who will be left carrying the burden, I think that's the wrong way to go.
Sarah, what about you? Were you pleased to see that EPR schemes were sort of addressed in the Environmental Omnibus before the Circular Economy Act?
I don't know if that's really the way to go, and I agree with Bruno there. Maybe it would have made more sense to do everything in the Circular Economy Act, but I do want to say, and well, you said it's Christmas, so, you know, I like Christmas, I like getting presents. I think that the Commissioner knows that our expectations are very high, and that my expectations are very high on what they will come up with now. Because, I mean, if you compare it to the last mandate, already in the first month of the mandate, we had a view of what we wanted to do on the circular economy, and now, well, I would say we're midterm, and it's still not clear. So that raises, of course, the bar on what we are expecting, and it will need to be a hell of a lot more than just implementation, because, well, in the previous mandate I worked a lot on the ESPR, for instance. Eco-design, very important, making sure that the way that we design products, that they last longer, that it's easier to repair them, and then at the end of the life that we can really resource all of those things inside again, so urban mining, making it easy to dismantle. But what we're seeing now when it comes to the implementation, for instance, I get a bit scared, in the sense we have a ban on the destruction of unsold goods. Well, there are quite some loopholes in there. I'm very much looking forward to a delegated act on textiles when it comes to eco-design. Right now, what we are seeing is more, yeah, this will be about information, for instance. So what we really need is ambition. And for instance, one of the things when I'm talking about the business case and making sure that, well, the handicap that we have right now, for instance, with plastics, if you compare virgin plastics versus recycled plastics, that's something that really needs to be addressed, and you can only address that via good legislation and by good trade policy. Because right now, I think we're all aware, we are being flooded with virgin plastics, or sometimes with recycled content that claims to be recycled content from Asia, but actually isn't. Well, if you don't address those issues, if you don't address the fact that virgin plastics is still cheaper, for instance with EPR schemes, for instance with eco-modulation, for instance by saying all our products need to have a certain amount of recycled content target on plastics recycled here in Europe, then you're not going to have a business case. And I mean, on e-waste, for instance, it's the same. So many people here in the room, I'm sure I'm not the only one, they have a smartphone lying somewhere in their house. These are valuable resources that right now are not being used. So you need deposit schemes. You need to make sure that everything is collected in a good fashion. You need to make sure that it's easy to disengage all of those elements. So yeah, for me, I'm really hoping that all of these things will be addressed, because again, right now, when it comes to our recycling capacity in Europe, we're actually moving backwards. There is a huge problem for some of our recyclers to even make ends meet.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are good examples. We just negotiated the end of life of vehicles, where indeed we've said there will be recycled content targets. Now, sadly, these targets were less than what the Commission had proposed, and that's of course thanks to the Conservatives in the Parliament, but still, these are the kind of things that the recycling industry is asking for, and that's really what I hope will happen. The demand side and making the business case work.
We'll have the chance to get into this question of price point between virgin and secondary materials in a second, but Commissioner, perhaps you'd like to come in here and tell us how the Circular Economy Act will come and complement the solutions you've proposed in the Environmental Omnibus and with the other existing laws on recycling and reuse and eco-design that are already on the table.
No, absolutely. Thank you for giving me your list, wishing list, and I think that we very much agree on a lot of this. And I also have high ambition on myself, actually, to put what we will put forward. The good thing is, I said it before. I mean, is that we are not starting from scratch. And as Sarah said, we have recently the end-of-life vehicle. We also have other legislations on because it needs to start with the design and the collection and all this. And I totally agree with you, Sarah, when you say we have a gold mine. You didn't say gold mine, but urban mining. This is actually something that we need to take care of, especially in this time. Maybe one thing that was mentioned, I mean, I hear you and I do respect the thinking of why did the Commission put forward these authorized representatives now in the omnibus and not wait? And that we can discuss, we will discuss it in the trilogue. But if I may say, what this shows to me is how difficult it will be, even though I hopefully put forward a bold Circular Economy Act, when this will be negotiated with the Member States and the Parliament, it will be difficult because, as I said, one of my priorities is to make a single market for circularity, for waste, for products, and to create the business case. And when I see the hesitance and the refusal or don't really want to take this, if I may say so, simple proposal, since the argument actually so far has not been that wait until the circular economy. It's been like, no, you know, these authorized representatives are very important for this and for that. Yes, it is. But still, if we even not can take this small step, then I see problem for us. So this, I think, is, if we really want to make the circularity come now, then we really also have to put away some of our personal, not personal, but hesitance, but to get the single market correct. So this is maybe my fear when I hear this, but let's discuss that later. It was something more on the use of revenues. I think that is a really, I mean, now we are nitty-gritty, but still, I think it's very important because transparency, of course, as you say, but also how we communicate, because as I said earlier, if we want to do this, we need to do this together. We need to have a change of mindset. Me as a policymaker, absolutely, but also consumer and businesses. And then consumer needs to trust what they pay. And so this is important. Finally, just on enforcement and the unfair level playing field, I think this is not easy to answer, but it is crucial if we really want to success. On plastic, we have tried, we really put forward custom codes. I mean, it's one thing, but the unfair level playing field is, of course, crucial, and I am totally with Sarah when you describe how the situation looks today, and that is not good for neither the environment, neither for jobs in Europe.
Yeah, so this is a key point in the sort of circular economy debate. The fact that virgin materials are largely imported from outside the bloc and cheaper than recycled materials. So you have mentioned custom codes, which were already sort of discussed in the plastic mini package that came out last year, but are you prepared to leverage trade measures and trade solutions to address this price point? Will we be seeing, for example, the carbon border adjustment mechanism being used to make virgin plastic or other materials more expensive when they are coming from abroad rather than the ones that are recycled in Europe?
Yeah, I mean, I don't rule out anything, and we have using trade measures, for example, when it comes to plywood. Maybe that is not circularity as such, but of course that is. We need to see to it that we have a level playing field. I mean, Europe is open for business, but they have to be everybody needs to follow and respect the rules that we have. And that is also because when my vision is that we can be circular and we can lead the circularity. That means that our businesses also can be on the global market, being efficient and have a business in this. So that's why I don't want to saying we close. For me it's openness, and that is something that I believe if we do this right together, then we can also that can create jobs here and also make us stronger, more prosperous.
Bruno, what do you think? Do you think we need to close the borders a little bit to make recycled content, European recycled material, more interesting than virgin materials for producers?
I think yes, and I think also that does not mean to be in contradiction with the idea that Europe is open for business and that would be open for exports. I think there is no economic bloc in the world right now that is not in one way or another protecting certain strategic industries. And if you look at the European Union being resource scarce and resource poor, and even if we would go into mining, it would take us 20 years to do it and to get anything out of it. The circularity ambition is an economic and an environmental one that is strategic for us. So we need to protect that sector, and that's not just stopping things at the border. It starts with making a market in Europe for European production. The end-of-life vehicles has been mentioned, I think, just a minute ago. We have indeed now recycled plastics targets in that end-of-life vehicles. What we don't have is recycled in Europe. You want to have the technology, you want to have the installations, you want to have the production in the European Union. And so if you're talking about market making, you need to talk about made in Europe, because recycled plastics can come from anywhere. Recycled in Europe comes from Europe, is jobs in Europe, is competitiveness in Europe, and it's a future, and it's a robustness for Europe and a base on which you can build. And so one thing that we need to do is get the acts together. We have an Industrial Accelerator Act coming up with a discussion on Made in Europe. We have the Circular Economy Act, where we want to do market making for recycled materials. Let's tie those things together and talk about Made in Europe. Not for everything. And critical raw materials are two essential ones that can be covered by a recycling sector in Europe. And that means closing the borders in both directions, by the way, because it makes no sense in sending critical raw materials ambassadors to the four corners of the earth if at the same time we are literally shipping boatloads of electronic and electrical waste full of critical raw materials outside of Europe, because indeed we don't have a common market in which they can circulate freely to be recycled.
Just including recycled in Europe in the Circular Economy Act isn't going to address the price difference with the snap of your fingers. Like, businesses will tell you that they're already struggling with high energy prices, that they're struggling to stay competitive because of red tape. Maybe letting them buy recycled material that's cheaper because it's coming from abroad is a way to find a compromise to get everyone on board, as the Commissioner was saying.
But at the same time, keeping your scrap metals, for example, in Europe with all the energy content that is already in there, and which can be recycled at a lot less energy input than it would be to produce virgin steel or virgin aluminium, is a basic no-brainer for European competitiveness, especially in a continent with high energy prices. So let's have this discussion not just for the planet, but with numbers in hand, and let's make sure we aim at where we can indeed promote European competitiveness through green environmental policy. If you can make a win-win, why not? You know, if that is the adjustment that the Commission needs to make the Green Deal work, I think the Green Deal can work better than ever if we do that.
So do you think, in a hypothetical scenario, that a producer using virgin material that comes from the EU is better than using recycled material that comes from outside the EU?
If you combine it with an instrument such as CBAM, yes.
Sarah, what do you think?
Well, I already said remade in Europe is really what we need to do. And so that means, of course, that you also need to take trade measures to protect your market. And I mean, we're talking right now, I'm negotiating the extension of the scope of CBAM. I do think that we need to look at chemicals and we need to look at plastics for that to make sure that we have that level playing field. And then I'm talking, of course, also about mirror clauses. I'm talking about audits, making sure that when we're talking about recycled content that comes from elsewhere, that we're actually sure that this is being processed in the best possible way, with less energy, in an environmentally sound way, of course, as well. And I mean, if that means that there is a price that needs to be bridged, well, then we should be willing to bridge the gap. And that's, of course, also when we're talking about eco-modulation, EPR schemes. I think really the profits of that should go into that kind of projects. We're talking about the reindustrialization of Europe, right? Bruno mentioned it. I'm also negotiating the Industrial Accelerator Act, where I also think we need to be even more vocal on the circular part of that reindustrialization. So it's not just about trade, of course. It's also about making sure that that price gap is being addressed. Maybe just to say, because you mentioned it in the previous conversation, I think what we also really need, if we mean business and if we say we want to be ambitious on circular economy, we need a goal. We need to have a clear North Star, as been said, but then on circular economy. And I do think, and I'm happy to hear that the Commissioner showed openness to it, that we need to have a kind of goal for resource management and for material footprint. Because if we don't, we are flying blind, and that is really not going to help anyone. And I think we've seen, for instance, with climate, that this really works. Yeah. If you have a concrete goal, everyone knows where, what direction we are taking and where we want to lead. Then you can also come up with an ambitious package, as we did the last time with Fit for 55, and we will have to do that for the 2040 goal as well, for circular economy. Because if we are very honest to each other, we've done some things, and of course some needs to be implemented still. But if you look at the recovery rates, if you look at our recycling rates, if you look at the fact that so much of the waste is indeed still just being shipped outside, where we have zero control about recovery or the way that this is actually being treated, then we are not really living up to the expectations. So that's really what I would love to see, is that ambition and that clear goal where we want to end up in 10 to 20 years.
Commissioner, perhaps you'd like to respond to all of these
No, I don't.
demands and objectives.
No, I don't. But we have a goal. In the Clean Industrial Deal, we say we will double from 12 to 24. And you can argue with me, if I talk with my daughters, they think it's too low anyway, but it is doubling what we are standing today. And also when it comes to, I mean, I agree with that we are in, I said it earlier, that we are in an industrial revolution. Yeah. Maybe that's too strong, but we are in a reindustrialization. I agree with that. But we also have to admit that some of the processes in some of these materials we don't have anymore. And it's no one's fault, but that's how it is. So that's also we need to take into account when it comes to steel, for example, when it comes to processing and seeing the whole value chain from some of these critical raw materials that we really need. And this takes time. And I was in Globsec in Prague last week or the week before. Time flies, and I do a lot of things. And anyway, talking with the defense industry, of course they need a lot of steel. And they today already use a lot of secondary materials, but it's also very important that we have the quality of steel. So I'm sorry to be very boring, but we don't have one magic stick, and if you just put a high target, then we will solve everything. I wish that was true, but it is not. So that is why I think the ambition is very high, double the circularity. Then I wish that in some materials, hopefully more, because doubling from 1% when it comes to critical to 2%, I mean, no, that is not enough, of course. That doesn't make, because I agree with you, we are a continent with not enough of resources. So I think for me, we are, the good thing from what I hear from their wishing list and my wish list is that we are very aligned. This is a good starting point. And then we also need to get the others on board and push all of us to a circularity. Because this is not It is not good to have only. It is a necessity, and that I think we all need to realize.
Absolutely, you will have almost the other majority in the European Parliament to convince with your proposal. So let's see how that goes when it comes out in September. That's all the time that we have today. So thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. Please, a round of applause for the Commissioner and the MEPs.